And we're live.
What is going on, Trash Talkers? We are back with another episode for you. Today, we're going to break down The Last Dance. So, as many of you know, ESPN has been going through the story of the final season of the Bulls and the culmination of what everything led up to that. It actually finished this Sunday. We were able to sit down and watch all 10 episodes. If you haven't, I highly suggest going to check it out. We are going to have some spoilers in here. I definitely suggest that you don't listen if you haven't seen it yet. So I would definitely do that, then come back and listen to this podcast because we're going to break down everything that we thought was very interesting and everything we learned from the show. So we're going to get started. And Nick, I'm just going to start it off with you. What overall, what do you think of The Last Dance?
I thought it was really well done. I really liked how they were able to uh, take into account everything. You weren't just getting a glimpse into the last season that everybody was together, them going for their final championship run, but you were getting an idea of how everything was put together, where everybody's background was, how this was all put, was made possible, and you really got to know each and every one of them in depth, which really helped build the story and really tell how triumphant this team really was in their pursuit of their sixth championship. It really was really well done. I really I'm glad that they were able to get that behind the scenes look in the 97-98 season because that really added something to this. But great job, and I hope they continue doing more of these. With all the other greats that have been in the league, all the other
For
great
sure, for sure.
organizations.
I think The Last Dance was a phenomenal job done by ESPN and every director and producer that was part of this. They did an incredible job. I know we have some differing opinions that we'll get into, but the ability for them to uh, create a story, show exactly what was happening, and then go back in time and provide some context, I thought was a really key and crucial element to this entire storytelling process. I love the fact that um, they were willing to show the good, the bad, and the ugly, and it wasn't there to salvage anyone's reputation. It wasn't there to ruin anyone. It was simply this is the story of one of the greatest uh, NBA runs that we have ever witnessed and may ever witness in our lifetime. Um, it was it was truly incredible. I'm so happy that this came out, especially during this time of COVID when everybody's around just to kind of watch it and has nothing else going on. This really provided a good amount of sports in our life, and it's always nice to see Michael Jordan and see his raw reactions to a lot of the things that he saw, didn't know about until they interviewed him. And we'll get into a lot more of that as we go. But overall, just an incredible job, and I'm really satisfied with how they did everything.
Absolutely, yeah. Though I think the one knock I really had, and we talked about this a little bit earlier. Uh, I really wish they it was a little bit more smooth in their transitions from going back and forth between the 78, I'm sorry, the 97-98 season to previous seasons in the 80s and early 90s. I wish they had kind of worked their way through the timeline instead of going back in time. I thought that would have been a little bit more smooth, and um, it would have made it easier to follow because at some points you're seeing guys like Steve Kerr and Dennis Rodman, and then you're like, oh, they've been with the team for many years, but in fact they've only been with them for a year or two, and it kind of makes you put things in the wrong perspective. You're not remembering, or you're not getting the right idea of how everything went down. So I wish they were a little bit more clear about that, but it's just a small knock I have against it. It still was a
See, and I liked that idea. Like I said, I think it provided context because and we don't have to debate this extensively, but I mean the idea is that it was the last dance, right? They're telling the story of the 97, 98 Bulls, and anytime they wanted to make a point, they had to go back in time to provide context for people who weren't there, who for people who didn't know what was going on at the time, people who like us who were little kids. We didn't know what the hell was going on. We like basketball though. So it's real. I thought it was very important to have it done that way because they stuck to the idea of this is the story of the last dance, and these back in time scenarios are going to provide context for what we're trying to talk about, not necessarily, you know, we're not necessarily talking about the entire Bulls run, even though that will be covered. It's really just the story of that final season.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, so we have a couple questions and scenarios that we have culminated from our watching time. Each episode, just to clarify, is an hour. So there's 10 episodes. It's 10 hours. Great documentary. It's on ESPN Plus. Again, I highly check it out. Um, that being said, this is your final attempt to stop watching before there's any spoilers. Go. So Nick, do you think you know, do you think Dennis Rodman, when Scottie Pippen returned in 1998, do you think that his issues of not being like the go-to guy for Michael, was that an overstep? Do you think he was justified in his thinking? Um,
No,
how do you think that should have played out?
yeah, I like the way Dennis Rodman reacted. I think I would react in the same manner because, for the majority, or for the beginning of the season, it's just you and MJ, and you have that chemistry working together. You know that there's a history between Scotty and MJ, but that's not in the current. That's not what we're dealing with right now. It's me and you, and we're doing this together. We're putting on a show together, and then all of a sudden your best friend comes back, and I'm the third wheel, and I really understand where Dennis is coming from. So I don't think he was being overly dramatic when he got annoyed and frustrated that he wasn't getting the attention from Michael, from the entire team, from the fans. He wasn't in the spotlight anymore. He was in the background, and so he had trouble finding himself as a role player. And I think that stems from his time with Detroit and San Antonio, where he had more of a star role. He came into this league and was one of the best defenders right off the bat, and that's why he was brought to Chicago. They put aside his ridiculous attitude and everything that comes along with Dennis Rodman, how outlandish he can be. They put that aside because they know what he brings to the court, and he was delivering and continued to deliver even though he was forced back into that role player that he wasn't too fond of. But I can understand. It seemed like he found his groove, towards the making that playoff run that they were in the stride of things. They had a good chemistry working all of them together. But I think it was once Scotty initially came back, that's I really understand why he had trouble falling initially, right back into that role player. You can't just go from being at the top to being a background guy, not getting any credit for doing your job at a high level. That's just a hard blow to take for a guy like Dennis Rodman, who likes to be in the spotlight at all times.
Yeah. So I mean, I profoundly disagree. Um, they weren't winning basketball games. I mean, it really comes down to the simple fact that they struggled mightily without Scottie Pippen there. And as much as Dennis Rodman felt like he was the guy that MJ could lean on, the the team needed more. And without Scottie Pippen, I mean, they all said it at the end, but without Scottie Pippen coming back from his demands to be traded and from his prolonged injury, I don't. They don't win that series against Utah. It's pretty simple, and I think Dennis Rodman, as great of a defensive stalwart as he is, he provided very little on the offensive side of the ball. And if there's nobody else who can kind of pick up some of the scoring when A, Michael's on the bench, or B, that he's being double teamed. Somebody like Scotty can take one on ones and truly has to be guarded as somebody who's a very good threat to either drive in or take a shot. I mean, he could do both, and it took a lot of pressure off of Michael. So, and they were able to win that way. It showed. So,
Well,
I think Rodman should have taken a little solace in the fact that they weren't winning basketball games with just the two of them, and that the welcoming of Scottie Pippen should have been there more than his own personal feeling of I should have been the guy.
well, it's not a secret that Michael Jordan had trouble getting rid of the ball. He always wanted to be the guy with the ball in his hands in every moment to make the big play. Dennis Rodman, he knows he's a defensive player. He knows that's where his role is. But there were a lot of people to help on offense. They had Tony Kukoc, they had Steve Kerr. They had these guys who were able to help out. But MJ is not giving them that many opportunities. And when Steve Kerr was given the opportunities, he thrived. He helped them win the championship. Without I don't think without Steve Kerr, they might not win it. He had a few
Well,
clutch
right,
shots
but you
that put
can't tell me that Steve Kerr had the same impact that Scottie Pippen had. I won't believe that for a single second.
Scotty's a facilitator. He's not really a scorer all that much. He's more of he's not gonna.
He was second on the Bulls in scoring.
Yeah, I know. He had a lot of those accolades. Second in pretty much everything. But I just don't think what he did couldn't be replaced. I think there was somebody, Tony or Steve or somebody on the bench who could have stepped up and filled Scotty's role. No one's gonna be Scotty, but they could, possibly do an adequate job. Michael doesn't need all that much help. I don't think when we saw Scotty play without MJ in the '93 season, then we saw that he was struggling to do it because he didn't like to score. He wasn't used to scoring all of the
He
time.
wasn't used to being a number one option, but he never had to be. That wasn't his role. His role was to be the number two scoring option, and he played that perfectly.
Yeah, and I think there were other people. I believe Steve Kerr could have definitely done that job.
I, I,
He was
I
an
don't
efficient
disagree.
offensive player. He wasn't.
He was
If
efficient
anything,
at times, but he was
Scotty
inconsistent.
Scotty was a well balanced player. He was good on offense. He was good on defense. He wasn't the best at anything.
He was I mean, he was a top 10 player in the NBA. I mean, to have that as your number two option, you have to put things into perspective and say, all right. I mean, if he's going to help us win a championship, I have to move over. And I think Rodman, being somebody who does what he wants all the time, had trouble accepting the fact that he was being told that he is no longer the go to guy. It was as you saw throughout the entire docu series, it was really just Rodman did his own thing at his own time, didn't care what anybody else thought, including leaving after game 2 of the finals to go to the WWE and spend a night with them. Um, you know, when you have a player like that, when you take something out of his control, that's when I think things may get soured with that player, and I think that's what we saw is that he did not react very well there. I just agree. I disagree that Dennis Rodman should have he should have just stepped aside and said, "We're not winning basketball games. Scottie Pippen will help us win basketball games. We've done it before. That we know what works. Let's get that back together." Um, so the biggest question, obviously, the focal point of this entire process or this entire documentary was Jerry Krause and how he handled the Last Dance, and how he basically told um,
Phil Jackson.
Phil Jackson that even if he won 82 games, 82 and 0,
Yep.
he wasn't coming back. Do you think it would have played out differently if Krause didn't make it publicly known that Phil Jackson was gone no matter what?
I don't think that it would have. believe, it was already known. Like Phil Jackson knew coming to the season. I think the players knew. I don't think because he had titled Phil Jackson had titled the season before it started, The Last Dance. So I think everybody knew at that point this was it for at least him. He wasn't
Well,
coming back.
those comments were made prior to that season. So Phil Jackson made that the last dance because of Krause's comments.
Yeah, I don't think it would have been any different. Because Phil Jackson, he's a straight shooter. He's not going to lie to you. He's not going to play games with you. He's going to tell you the truth, and he's a very honest guy. I don't. So I think that he still would have done the same exact things he did. He wouldn't have put his players in different positions. He even what I believe it was the Eastern Conference semifinals, or it might have been the Eastern Conference Finals, where it was a 3-2 series. Or they were I don't know if they were down. I can't remember, but Phil Jackson was like, "Hey, if we win, we win. If we lose, we lose." Like he wasn't putting pressure on his guys to do anything different. Just because it was the last season. I don't think if if it wasn't known, I don't think he would have played it any other way. I don't think that the players didn't really seem to react to it too much during the time. Yeah, they did off the court, but when it was on the court, they didn't try to do anything extra special because this was the last opportunity they're going to have. No one, they just played their game. They did what they had to do. They did their job, and that's why they won. There was nothing super special that anybody did, that any particular person did, that made it any different from any other season.
So, I just disagree. I think that
It may
what's
have
different
affected them going into the off season because Phil Jackson left, Scotty was left,
traded.
traded, Dennis Rodman was released, MJ retired again. So you had all these transactions happen, but they're probably going to happen anyway, no matter if this was public knowledge or not.
I think that a lot of things would have been the fire would not have been there because here's the thing: if Jerry Krause doesn't make those comments, Phil Jackson remains as coach. It's that simple. So his job isn't on the line. The players aren't playing for him. They're not, trying to like one thing that was pretty apparent throughout is that Michael Jordan created things out of thin air to motivate himself. That final season, he didn't have to create a single thing. He was fueled by his hatred for Jerry Krause and that whole situation. And I think that essentially was the same feeling that every player had. I think they played their asses off for Phil Jackson, and I believe that they all knew that this was the last time that this Bulls team had the chance at dynasty. This was going to be their legacy. They knew that this was coming to an end, and they wanted to leave it the only way they knew how, and that was the end of a three-peat. I think that's where we kind of see a difference here is that they knew that they were heading toward the end, and they gave absolutely everything. I mean, look at Scottie Pippen, right? He was so hurt in the finals, but if he knew that there was another season to come around, he may not have come back during that finals, and with the back injury, he may have just sat out and said, you know what, if we lose, we'll get him next year. There was no next year at that point, so he gave everything he possibly could at that point in time. So I think maybe things wouldn't have been different, but overall, I think the mentality and the way people were treated and the way they played, I think things that was fueled by Krause's comments going into that season.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely possible. Jerry Krause was, made a lot of enemies. But I don't think that his doing was the sole energizer for the entire team. I know, it played a part. Some people, Scotty didn't want to play because of his contract situation. The injury happened. MJ used it in the beginning of the season to fuel him, but as they really showed, MJ found a way of finding somebody on the opposing team to fuel his anger, to fuel his drive. it really wasn't Krause. He wasn't. They really weren't referring back to Krause all that much when they were in the playoffs. It was, someone on the Knicks, someone on the Pacers, someone on the Supersonics. It was somebody on each team that they were facing that he didn't like, and he wanted to get retribution, or he may have heard something, or made something up that they may have said, just to get angry, get his head in the right you know right space to put on the shows he did. But I still think that would have happened no matter what. That's just who MJ was. Scotty was miserable about his contract for years because it was a couple of years after he signed that deal where everybody else was getting his 7 year contract annually. So I don't think that it would have made too much of a difference.
I just think
There were
that
a lot of
a player like Scottie Pippen, again, if Krause doesn't make those comments, he may not return after the trade doesn't go through. Like after he's not traded, what like because what's the point? Then he has nothing to lose. But this was his final run. He knew this was his final run with the Bulls. He knew this is Phil Jackson's final run with the team. I mean, he chose to be a part of that after his trade demands weren't met. I think that's a big thing that was fueled by Jerry Krause's comments that this was Phil Jackson's last time, and this was Phil Jackson titling it the Last Dance. I think there was a lot of pressure put on these players um, at the in that final season to ball out not only for themselves but to show up Jerry Krause, to show that Phil Jackson was a great coach, to show that this team shouldn't have been put into a position where this was titled the Last Dance. I mean, you can look even Reinsdorf, the owner, he wanted to bring everyone back for one more year, and Phil Jackson stuck to his guns and said, "No, I'm going to take some time and step away." And then you saw the flood of events that happened from there. Like you said, MJ retired, Pippen traded, Rodman released, Steve Kerr traded. Um, Everybody went their separate ways. Like the whole team disbanded at that point. And then, not too long after that whole process was Jerry Krause was relieved of his duties. He lost his job in 2003. So we're talking about the end of the 97-98 season. He only had 5 more years with the Bulls. After that, it was over.
I mean, if you really look at what he did in the beginning of his tenure as the GM, he did as good of a job as anybody else has ever done in the NBA. No one
For
else
sure.
can say they've ever done that, and I don't think it'll ever happen again. It's just we've gotten too good in our research to find anybody anywhere in any corner of the world that is good at basketball. So that'll never happen again. And Jerry
Or to
Krause,
be handed a player like Tony Kukoc,
yeah, because
and
he's from he came from Europe. People weren't paying attention to European leagues that much, and he was kind of on the come up before everybody else, and then he pounced on it, and they faced him in the Olympics, and they kind of made him look like a fool, but that's also the dream team. He was going up against the best of the best before he even had a chance to get a taste of what the NBA was like. Yeah, defense isn't a thing in Europe, and he wasn't used to it. And it was a rude awakening for him. And Scotty, and MJ were right there to introduce him to it,
yeah, they were
firsthand.
the welcoming committee that took him for it.
Yeah,
Um, my biggest, with Jerry Krause, his he was so brilliant with his roster moves until he let his personal feelings and bias get in the way. I think that's really what killed him. Because when I mean, let's face it, they made fun of him a lot. They showed it a lot on screen. Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, they made fun of him a lot about his height. They called him a troll. I mean, they called him a lot of things, and I think he was tired of the fact that he didn't get enough credit. He didn't get enough respect from the players. Partially to his own fault. I mean, he didn't require respect because of how he treated people, and I think he at the end of the day, his his biggest fault was his personality, which he then let get in the way of his job, and that is what caused the end of all of this. But personally, and I just think that had they been together for another, say, 3 years, right? I say they win at least two more championships.
Yeah, I don't know because you had Shaq and Kobe, coming
That
together.
wasn't until 2001, though.
Yeah, but I don't know. Are you saying it feels there?
Yeah, if the whole thing is still there, right? Because Phil Jackson then goes to Los Angeles, they win five championships, but other than I mean, like if he's still with the Bulls, Michael Jordan, Dennis Rodman, Scottie Pippen, Steve Kerr,
It's
if they're
po-
all still there,
It's possible. Michael was getting older. His body was having trouble keeping up, playing 45 minutes every game for the entire season plus an entire playoff run. And he was getting beat up all the time. This is the old NBA where you could go and punch somebody in the face and you're not going to get ejected. So you get away with a lot, and that takes a real beating on your body when you're facing Patrick Ewing and all these big name players, Gary Payton. These are the best of the best going up against each other, and you're always gonna double team Michael Jordan. No matter who it is, who you have on your team, because that's just how good he is. You need to stop him. If you can stop him, then you take the heartbeat away from the Bulls, and you throw them off their pace. So I don't know if they. I think someone would have come around soon. I mean, there were teams who had in the past were able to get to MJ and beat him down and throw him off his game, throw everybody else off their game when they're thrown into new roles. So I don't think that I think winning two more in 3 years is asking a lot. Maybe one, but I'd be I really don't think they could win more than one. I don't think that's feasible. I know they won. They had two three-peats, but the game was also evolving. New people were coming in to the league. I just don't think that everything was going to hold true for another few years.
yeah, I mean it's pure speculation, but my
Hmm.
belief would be that they had the talent to at least compete for a championship. If they were together for 3 more years, they would have been in the playoffs all 3 of those years. And as much as anyone else, anything can happen in the playoffs. They could either, get swept. They could, dominate. You never know what could happen. So I think speculation is tough, but overall, I think it was a truly it was sad to see it end. And Michael Jordan put it the best way. He was like, listen, if you offered a 1 year contract to everyone to come back, I guarantee you everybody would have come back. He said it might have taken Scotty some convincing, but overall, if he knew that he was going to get everybody that he wanted there back, including Kerr, MJ, Rodman, Phil Jackson, he would have done the same exact thing, and I would have loved to see for them to go for a fourth straight, even if that was the final season. Even if they didn't culminate in a championship, I think they had one more really good opportunity in them.
Uh,
But you said something that was very interesting. You said the game was a lot more physical in the '90s, which is fair.
mhm.
'80s and '90s, it was very fair. Um, do you think players um, from back then would be able to succeed in today's game, where if you sneeze on LeBron James, you get caught, a technical and a personal.
uh, I don't think that most of them could because the way they were able to beat some players down gave others the opportunity to make easy plays. And when you're not able to throw an elbow into somebody or land on them coming down or throw them while they're in midair and get away with it, you know, then you're facing a guy who's pretty much, besides being fatigued, their body is ready to go. They're not physically worn down as much um, in this day and age. It's all this day and age. It's all about pulling up and shooting. There isn't much physicality. There isn't much happening in the paint. If it is, it's a guy like Giannis, going up and just dunking it from the foul line. There isn't much physicality. There's not even a lot of play down low. So it would have been hard for the bigger guys to compete in today's NBA. It would have been, I think it would have been more guys like Isaiah Thomas, or Gary Payton, who are able to facilitate and help out on defense, or Steve Kerr, who's able to pull up at the 3 point line, John Paxson, who's able to pull up from outside. Guys like that who don't drive as much. MJ obviously would have succeeded because he can score from anywhere and he can defend a lot of people. So he's like the one special case where it really doesn't change in his instance. But I'd say for a lot of the bigger guys who thrived on just pounding it home in the paint, working themselves down low, then I don't think they would have had as much success as they did.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the top players in today's game, they are actually the most physical players out there. I mean, Giannis and LeBron James are two of the top names in today's NBA, and they're one of the more physical players that we have in the NBA. So I'm not gonna say somebody like Scottie Pippen couldn't thrive in today's NBA. I think he would have to adjust his mentality a little bit. Um, but somebody like Charles Oakley or Patrick Ewing, Dennis Rodman, uh, Bill Laimbeer, those guys, no shot. I mean, look what happens. With the closest thing that I would say that we have to somebody like that right now would be Draymond Green. I think he would be the closest thing that we have to somebody from that time era, and we call him one of the dirtiest players in the game because of how physical he plays. I mean that's really what it comes down to, and is that physicality has now been conflated with dirty play, and I think the entire shift of the NBA has seen a lot of that mentality. Like you brought up the fact that a lot of players from Europe don't play defense, and I think we've gotten an influx of European players, Asian players. Same thing, you know, a lot of scoring, a lot of fast moving pieces on the offensive side of the ball. The ball moves constantly. The up and down the court, it wasn't half court offenses. Like those are gone now. It's you drive down the court on a fast break, you put up a shot. If it doesn't go in, everybody's on the back. You don't see many people rebounding. You don't see many teams running half court offenses anymore. Look, take a team like the Houston Rockets or the Boston Celtics. Those teams run more than any team that I've ever seen. Like they're constantly they get the rebound on the defensive side of the ball. They're up the court, the shots up quick, and if it doesn't go in, they're on the defensive side of the ball again. I mean, it's pretty. That seems to be the way the league is going. It's not prolonged offensive series anymore.
Yeah, seems like you have to be a better sprinter these days than anything else. It's all about being able to run constantly for 48 minutes, and whoever you add a shot to that, and that makes an NBA player these days. So I now the if we were to take the reverse, how do you think if we were to take current NBA players and throw them back in the 80s and 90s, do you think that they would also face issues? Do you think a lot of the big names like Giannis, LeBron, James Harden, even if we were to add in like Yao Ming or Tracy McGrady, do you think they would struggle in those
So
days?
players like Tracy McGrady, I think they still got some of that. I mean, you look at a player like Kevin Garnett, right? He was kind of the bridge from one side of the era to the other. Same with Kobe Bryant, Tracy McGrady, Vince Carter. Those are those players. When you're talking about somebody like LeBron James, as physical as he is now, I can't imagine him getting beaten down the way Michael Jordan did by the Bulls. Sorry, by the Pistons or by the Pacers or by the Knicks. I mean, he every team that he faced wanted to knock the ever living shit out of him every time down the floor. It was that simple. With the Pistons, they had three or four guys who just surrounded him, and you heard Isaiah Thomas and some of those guys talk about how they wanted to hurt him. They physically wanted to hurt him and get him out of the game. I I can't imagine a player like Steph Curry or James Harden, even Russell Westbrook, taking that amount of punishment. I just can't see them thriving in something like that. LeBron James, Giannis Antetokounmpo, those players, they are physically gifted. They are built like brick shit houses. So I think they could take the beating. I don't know if mentally they would want to. If they were brought up in that era, that's a different story. Maybe they, if that if that's the case, but um, it's tough to tell. I don't see a lot of current NBA players being able to thrive in the previous eras. And here's my biggest issue, right? We always are debating who's better, Michael or LeBron, Kobe or Michael, Kobe or LeBron. I mean, you can't compare these eras with the way the rules are set up and the way these games are played anymore, because you can't tell me that you're going to compare Michael Jordan to Bill Russell to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. Like, they all play different styles of basketball. I don't think they can be compared. The numbers just don't match. The numbers are not, they didn't come around the same way as the numbers do now in other eras. So I think that we need to stop with the comparisons and saying this person's better because of these numbers, or this person played a more physical style. If you're successful in your era, you're doing what you need to do to win, and I think that that's the biggest key that we need to take away.
Yeah, I agree. I think some of the big names, LeBron, Giannis, the bigger, more built guys who are more physical down in the paint, could do well back then. But then I look at possibly the like a guy Draymond Green, even Marcus Smart. These guys who just put their bodies on the line every play, every time, whether it's offense or defense. They're on the ground going for balls. They're jumping up. They're getting kicked. They're getting punched. They're getting elbows. They're doing whatever they have to get their team the ball and score. And they know their role. They're fine being a role player, so they'll fit on most teams. So I don't I think there are less people in today's NBA that would thrive in the old style of the NBA than other older players playing in today's game. So I think that's why you have to give a little bit more credit to MJ when the debate is being talked about. And like you said, we can't really give a fair comparison. But I think we need to if we are going to compare it, you need to take into account how different the game is versus the other, because the way the NBA has transitioned, it's very soft compared to how it was, and that has a real impact on the numbers.
Yeah, I don't think you would see LeBron driving into the paint in year 17 the same way he did in years 1 and 2 if he was getting just absolutely destroyed by a player like Bill Laimbeer for 5 games out of each season plus playoff series. I think if you're getting destroyed by every team that wants to see you hurt, that's going to stop a lot of players from being successful and a lot of players from driving into the paint and trying to score at will. I mean, you have to be some sort of just absolutely insane to welcome that sort of punishment. And obviously, Michael Jordan, as great as he is, was a little bit insane. I mean, I'm not going to be, I'm not going to be,
Delusional
liar.
about it, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think that overall, a lot of players now couldn't work back then, and I still think a lot of players back then couldn't. They couldn't deal with the lack of touching and a lack of physicality that we have now. So I think it works both ways. It's not just a one way street here. Um, the players that we have now, just to say that they couldn't compete back then isn't to take anything away from them. I still think James Harden is one of the best shooters that I've ever seen, and Russell Westbrook is one of the best scorers that I've ever seen. Just because I don't think that they can thrive in 1994 doesn't mean I'm taking anything away from them. So I just want to put that out there. But just to bring it back to the last dance, during the 93-94 season, Scottie Pippen notoriously quit on his team and sat out the end of the game where Tony Kukoc made that infamous last second shot to win the game. Um, do you think that game or the season would have turned out completely different if Pippen hadn't sat that out?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that they I believe they made it to the semifinals in that season, and they lost to the Knicks. I don't think that they go that far without that controversy because they weren't playing that great. And Scotty was kind of folding under the pressure of being the guy all the time. And he was finally in the shoes of what MJ was dealing with for many years. And he was breaking pretty quickly. And towards the end of the season, he was hurt, he was banged up. He just didn't have the mental capacity like Michael does, like he did when he was playing, where he could just throw all that aside and just find something deep down inside that pushes him that extra mile to finish out the game to put his team up top. And in that situation, he was being greedy, and that's something we don't really see from Michael Jordan. That's more of a modern day issue where players are being greedy. So I think that uh, but I think the what helps a lot was what happened afterward, when the team sat there in the locker room and they started working out their issues, talking it out, just getting all their grievances out in the open, making so everybody was aware of everything going on, and they had a true understanding because once you understand where everyone's coming from, then you could learn how you can try to fix it. And you get an idea of where to start. And so I think that definitely helped them rebuild their chemistry because I think they were missing a piece after Michael left. They didn't really uh, they didn't pay much attention to it. But now it was kind of on full display. There, I don't want to be the guy, and Scotty was didn't want to be the guy, and I think he needed the support from his teammates to help him get there, and I think it took everybody else to realize that Scotty can't do this alone. Just because he's been great behind NJ doesn't mean he's going to fulfill his shoes as soon as he leaves. He's still going to be Scotty, and so I think that that really helped them the morale of the team strengthen it and really come together for the remainder of the season.
The biggest difference I saw with Scotty and Michael, besides obviously the gameplay, their leadership styles. Scotty was the nice guy, the I'm gonna pick you up all the time, and Michael Jordan. I mean, he verbally bludgeoned the entire team on a daily basis. It's kind of created a lot of controversy on social media as this was unfolding. People calling Michael Jordan a terrible teammate and that sort of thing. I want to just get your quick thoughts. What do you think? Do you think that made Michael a bad teammate? Do you think that he should have been a little easier on those guys?
No, because and I think they addressed this a little bit in the documentary where Michael isn't Michael without the verbal abuse because he's so competitive. He I think it was Scotty who said he wants you to be on his level. He wants you to be as good as he is, even though you can't. You physically can't. Like
Right.
you get to a point where you peak. Actually, I believe it was Horace Grant who said that. And you you know he's never going to believe that you are peaked. You're capped by your physical abilities. He always because he I think he personally believes if I can do it, you can do it, and there's nothing that's going to change his mind about that. And he thinks if he keeps pushing you, pushing you, pushing you, because I believe that's how his father used to push him, and so he adapted that mentality, and he used that to push his team, and that had worked in the past where it got them. If he didn't see the results he wanted, they weren't getting enough wins or lost a game they shouldn't have, then he's going to go extra hard on you because it's worked in the past, and it's worked with him. So if it's something that uh, works to get the team together to make everybody better, then I don't think that's a knock against Michael. I don't think that makes him look like a bad person. I think that just makes you understand what it takes to be a champion. Because everybody who's been great has had to come back from low points and be better than ever. And you have to find yourself. You have a certain drive, a certain fire that's unique to everybody else's as a normal, to normal people. You're not a normal person. You're a superstar, and only certain people have that. And you can't fault somebody a superstar for being who they're supposed to be.
Yeah, I think it worked in a lot of sense. You talk they obviously spent a lot of time interviewing Horace Grant and Steve Kerr and a lot of the role players that were on the Bulls. Um, yeah, they don't seem to have any animosity towards Michael,
No,
the, especially with the way he treated them. I think a lot of people say, well, look, they said he was a bad teammate. They didn't say that. What they said was that he was tough on them, and they didn't necessarily agree with how he went about it, but they were winning championships, and that's what it led to. And they were okay with, what, if this is what it takes, if this is how he drives us, then that's what we're going to have to do to win championships. And they were fine with that. I think that's what it comes down to, is that uh, we're we're part of a generation of people that don't like to be pushed, and a verbal, like something like that verbal confrontation that Michael gave every single day, they take that as abuse, where that's leadership. I mean, it's that simple. If you've been in a locker room, or if you've been around a team, you know that it's not all sunshine and butterflies when you're trying to motivate people around you. There are some tough things said in there, and the whole idea is that you are a brotherhood or sisterhood, and you guys are supposed to be able to, you know, to say what's on your mind, and motivate each other, and not take it personally as an attack on you, but more or less as something that's supposed to help drive you. And I think that's what's being missed in a lot of what he was doing, and a lot what he was saying, is that people are taking his words out of context. They're putting them into text on social media, and they're saying, Michael said this, how do you defend him for saying this? It's because it was in the moment. He was trying to motivate that person by saying something. Obviously not everything was meant as motivation. Again, all the times he went at Jerry Krause, like, yeah, he was just a bully to Jerry Krause. They all were. But at the end of the day, like, for his teammates, that he was a great teammate, and I don't think they would have changed a single moment, especially when he got into a fist fight with Steve Kerr. I think that was like one of the best stories I heard on the entire docu series.
yeah, and Steve Kerr acknowledges that it helped toughen him up a little bit because we also have to take in perspective this is a different time. You could say things that you can't say today, and just because stuff was said back then, you don't need to apologize for it now. That's a huge misconception. People look for you to apologize if you said something previously, but you don't need to. And I stand by Michael and his actions. If you grow a lot of these guys have been in locker rooms where that's what the mentality was. When you're around a bunch of guys like this all the time, you're going to be on each other to make each other better. You're going to work off of each other, feed off of each other, and he needed to toughen them up mentally by yelling at them and all this because you're going to go out and face a team that's going to beat you down physically. And if you are in the right mental state, you can handle the physical attack. And I think that really helped them get through the harder teams late down the stretch in the season.
Sure. Yeah, I 100% agree. Before we close this out, I just want to get your final thought. Um, Overall, this was an incredible job. Two things. What was the most surprising or like biggest moment for you in the whole series?
Um, I think I know where you're going to go with this, so I'm going to choose something different. But I think it was there was more animosity between Horace Grant and MJ than I thought. And I think now it's coming to the limelight even more. I think it's spurred again because MJ said Horace was the one who gave all their secrets away to Sam Smith, who wrote the Jordan Rules book, and that created a lot of controversy back then. And now that it's come to light that MJ thinks it was him, now Horace finds he wants to defend himself. No one really knows who did it, and so it's always going to be speculation. But I was surprised to see that those two they had so much success together, and they didn't really show too much as far as them butting heads in the documentary. But the way they talked about each other, it just seemed like. And then when Horace was with the Magic and they faced each other, NJ just wanted to go at him, and he really had a dislike for him, and I was really surprised to hear that.
Yeah. Um, Mine, and we talked about this before,
Hmm.
but it was hearing about Steve Kerr's father. Um, Steve Kerr and everything that the Kerr family went through. His parents being such academics was already something that blew me away. I didn't realize how smart the Kerr family was. Um, Especially in a time where academia wasn't as prevalent as it is today. You're talking about a professor of uh, was it Middle Eastern politics and um, you know he just and then he went to was it Beirut
Hmm.
and he became the president of a university over the American university over there. Um, the day after he got there, or the day before he got there, the president of the university was kidnapped by some local militia, and then I don't know if it was the same year or within a year, whatever the case was, but he was shot in the head by that same militia because they didn't like Americans
Hmm.
in Beirut, and I was like, what? Like that is devastating. And this happened while Steve Kerr was in college. This didn't happen while he was on in Chicago. But nonetheless, I mean, to share that type of um, tragedy um, experience to share that with Michael Jordan, the way his father was brutally murdered. He was shot and killed for his car, basically. I mean, that's really what it was. He was off. He was sleeping on the side of the road because he was too tired to drive. Um, Two 18-year-olds came up, shot him in the head, and dumped his body in a river. I mean, to, not only to have that happen, but to have two players whose fathers were shot in the head is just incredible to me. Like it's so that was one of the toughest parts of the entire doc for me, and most surprising for sure. I wasn't any what prepared for that. I knew there was some tragedy with James Jordan, but I didn't know and really much about it. And obviously, instead of looking into it, I found it all out during the doc. But yeah, I just that was a tough time for me.
No, that I think that was a tough time for a lot of people. That was a real shock, and when that all happened, I mean, obviously you had an inclination where that was heading, and sad to see how it played out. I think I was kind of annoyed. I wish they had talked about it. I know they brought it up to Steve and asked him, "Have you guys talked about your dads?" And he said, "No, that's just something we don't talk about." And um, I kind of wish they did. I feel like if they had that together, built on their relationship on that early on, And I know it was tough for both of them, so I understand why they didn't bring it up. But I feel like that would have made them such a stronger unit, and they wouldn't have faced some of the troubles they did with in the Eastern Conference semifinals and finals, and they would have had more of a chemistry together. It would have been more of a unit because he MJ already had chemistry with Scotty and Dennis, and he was still working on it with Steve Kerr. I think if they had talked about that, then they would have been a full unit and they could have gone really far. I mean, they did go really far, but I think they would have had an easier time.
for sure. Um, Last question, and this is where we will end this week's episode of Trash Talk. But um, the the Last Dance was an incredible series. I loved it. 10 episodes I thought was going to be a lot. I binge watched the shit out of them.
Hmm.
It was incredible.
Yeah,
If you could have another documentary just like this for any team, any sport, where would you? What team would you, past or present? Where would you want this to? What would you want to see?
that's a tough question. You could go in a lot of different directions, and I don't know. This might come as a surprise, but I might want to go with I believe it was the 16-17 Houston Astros, just to get a glimpse behind the scenes of everything that went down with the cheating. Just to get to know how that who started that, who was involved. I wish there was a documentary crew following them that entire season, and we could learn in 20 years, what transpired, because that would be wild. And I love to hear about the controversy and all these accusations, but we want to blame certain players without having all the facts. I think if we could have all the facts in that situation, we could put some of these things to rest. Um,
For sure.
I think that would be a really cool one. But if I know I've said this before, the Last Dance really just followed it. It followed the Bulls, but it really followed Michael. And I guess if we're gonna follow another player and team, with a big focus on one player, it's gonna be probably Kobe and Shaq. I don't know what year. Um, it's one of the, Kobe and the Lakers, with Shaq is in the Pippen role. Get because they had a lot of turmoil together. Um, so that would be a good one. But there's a lot of different directions. I think either of those I would love to see.
For sure. I would probably go with, and this isn't just a Homer thing, but I would love to see the inner workings and the whole enchilada being made of the the New England Patriots and Tom Brady and the whole breakup scenario that's happened this offseason. In 20 years, that's what I would love to see. Is that literally how all of this came to fruition? I know we understand that the Brady six. We've seen that part. We understand that he had to he was the fill in for Drew Bledsoe after he was taken out by Mo Lewis in the Jets game. I understand all that, but everything that went into the '07 season, everything, Spygate, everything that went into Deflategate, everything that went into, the Seahawks Super Bowl, the Falcons Super Bowl, losing to the Giants twice, overcoming all of that. I would like that is something that I would want to really dive into and really take a look at. And I mean, those Patriots teams were not met without controversy. Even as recently as today, I believe, Lawyer Malloy is still shouting from rooftops about how angry and disgruntled he is with Bill Belichick about trading him and removing him from the Patriots. I was just like, that would I think overall that would be incredible. But I also think the Kobe Shaq. I mean, that I feel like that is the natural progression of where we go from here. Is we need to see more about that, and obviously, um, we won't be able to follow Kobe. Um, we won't be able to get that interview, so that would truly be unfortunate. But uh, they're overall, I think those are the ones that I would love to see. Um, you know, I might even go as far as the Yankees, the 2000s Yankees. I'd like to see that as well.
Yeah, they're
The
just so.
acquisition of A Rod and
Mhm.
some of these things that we've taken for granted in recent years. Um, I'd really love to get a behind the scenes look at some of those teams and those how they all came to fruition, things like that.
Absolutely, yeah. There's so many great stories that come out of the out of every sport, and we'd love to take a deep dive into all of them. But like I think that's a really good place to end this. And I really want to hear what you guys think. What would you like to see after? What do you want to see as the next Last Dance? What's the next big documentary series that you want to see in the sports world? We gave you our opinion, so let us know. Give us your thoughts and opinions. Leave a comment. Talk to us on Twitter. We're always there. Just keep coming and talking to us. We love it. Um,
Yeah, I'll turn my notifications back on after this past weekend.
it got a little crazy for a little bit, but we love it. We truly love it, and we want it to keep on coming. So don't stop. Let us know your thoughts and everything. And thanks for tuning in for this episode of Trash Talk.